May 20th, 1941, 6:42 in the morning. The island of Crete. Sergeant Alfred Clive Hume stood in the courtyard of the Field Punishment Center at Platanias, watching the sky fill with death. German transport aircraft stretched from horizon to horizon, hundreds of Junkers U-52 trimotors flying in formation toward Maleme Airfield. As Hume watched, the aircraft began disgorging their cargo. Paratroopers, thousands of them. Their white parachutes blossomed against the Mediterranean blue like a plague of jellyfish descending from heaven. Hume was 30 years old, a farm laborer from Dunedin before the war. Provost Sergeant for 8 months, responsible for disciplining soldiers who had broken military law. 0 combat kills, 0 combat experience of any kind. The men under his supervision were not model soldiers. They were prisoners. 23 New Zealanders who had been caught fighting, drunk on duty, stealing supplies, or committing other infractions that earned them time in the punishment center. The Army called them bad men. Hume knew better. They were soldiers who had made mistakes. And right now, with German paratroopers landing across the island, he needed every man who could hold a rifle and pull a trigger. He ran to the armory, grabbed every weapon he could carry, and distributed them to the prisoners. No paperwork, no authorization, no time for questions. The men took the rifles without a word. They did not know it yet, but they were about to participate in the largest airborne invasion in military history. They did not know that their sergeant would become one of the most lethal counter-snipers of the Second World War. They did not know that within 8 days, Clive Hume would kill 33 German snipers using tactics so audacious that military historians would debate their legality for decades. All they knew was that the sky was full of Germans, and someone had finally given them weapons. Hume led them toward the sound of gunfire. Operation Mercury was Adolf Hitler's boldest gamble of 1941. The island of Crete, lying at the southern edge of the Aegean Sea, was the last Allied foothold in Greece. British, Australian, New Zealand, and Greek forces had evacuated to Crete after the German conquest of mainland Greece in April. They were exhausted, under-equipped, and demoralized. But Crete was strategically vital. Its airfields could support bombers that threatened the Romanian oil fields, Germany's primary source of fuel. Its harbors could shelter the Royal Navy, projecting British power across the eastern Mediterranean. As long as the Allies held Crete, Hitler's southern flank remained vulnerable. General Oberst Kurt's student, commander of Germany's airborne forces, proposed a solution. The Fallschirmjäger, Germany's elite paratroopers, would seize Crete in an airborne assault. No amphibious landing, no naval support, just paratroopers dropping from the sky onto enemy-held territory, capturing airfields by coup de main, and holding them until reinforcements arrived by air. Nothing like this had ever been attempted. The invasion force comprised over 22,000 German troops, most of them Fallschirmjäger, supported by mountain infantry that would arrive by transport aircraft once the airfields were secured. The assault would begin with simultaneous drops at 4 locations: Maleme, Kanya, Rethymno, and Heraklion. Speed was essential. The paratroopers would be vulnerable during the initial drop, carrying only light weapons scattered across unfamiliar terrain. They needed to capture at least 1 airfield within the first day, or the invasion would fail. The defenders knew an attack was coming. British intelligence had broken German codes and knew the approximate timing and locations of the assault. Major General Bernard Freyberg, commanding the Allied forces on Crete, had roughly 42,000 troops under his command, including 10,000 Greeks. but the defenders were scattered across the island. Communications were poor. Heavy weapons were scarce. Most critically, the Allies lacked air cover. The Royal Air Force had withdrawn its last fighters from Crete on May 19th, leaving the defenders at the mercy of German aircraft. At 800 hours on May 20th, the first wave of German paratroopers jumped over Maleme and Kanya. 3,000 men in the initial drop, with thousands more following throughout the day. The slaughter began immediately. The Fallschirmjäger had trained for years. They were superbly fit, highly motivated, and utterly confident in their elite status. They expected to land, assemble, and overwhelm the demoralized Allied defenders within hours. What they encountered was carnage. The New Zealand 22nd Battalion was dug in around Maleme Airfield. They had been warned about the coming assault. They had prepared defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire, and they had scores to settle after the humiliating retreat from Greece. Private George Thompson of the 22nd Battalion watched the first paratroopers descend over Hill 107, the high ground overlooking Maleme. He said, "They came down like snowflakes, beautiful in a terrible way, white parachutes everywhere, and then we opened fire." The Fallschirmjäger were helpless during their descent. Suspended beneath their parachutes, they could not shoot back, they could not maneuver. They could only watch as rifle and machine gun fire tore through their ranks. Many were dead before they hit the ground. Others landed in olive groves and vineyards where New Zealand soldiers were waiting with bayonets.
The fighting was savage, close-quarters combat with no quarter given or expected. Gefreiter Hans Kreindler was 19 years old, a veteran of the Rotterdam drop in May 1940. He landed in an olive grove 200 meters from the airfield perimeter and immediately found himself in a nightmare. "We were scattered everywhere," Kreindler wrote in a letter recovered after the war. "Men hanging dead in trees, men shot as they tried to unbuckle their harnesses. I found my weapon container 50 meters from where I landed. 3 New Zealanders were between me and the container. I had only my pistol and my knife." Kreindler survived that first hour. Most of his stick did not. By May 20th, the German assault on Maleme had stalled. The paratroopers had suffered appalling casualties. Entire companies had been wiped out. Officers and NCOs had been specifically targeted by New Zealand marksmen who understood that killing leaders would paralyze the German command structure. But the Fallschirmjäger kept fighting. They were elite soldiers who had been told they were invincible. They refused to believe they could fail. And in the chaos of that first day, the German snipers began their work. Fallschirmjäger snipers were specialists, trained at dedicated schools in Germany, equipped with the finest optics available. Their primary weapon was the Karabiner 98K, the standard German infantry rifle, fitted with a Zeiss Silvier 4x optical sight. The scope provided 4-power magnification, allowing precise shot placement at ranges exceeding 500 meters. The snipers wore distinctive camouflage smocks in the Splittermuster pattern, a design of angular shapes in green, brown, and tan that broke up the human silhouette against Mediterranean vegetation. From a distance, a motionless sniper was nearly invisible against the olive groves and rocky hillsides of Crete. Their tactics were simple and devastating. Infiltrate behind enemy lines, find an elevated position with good observation, identify high-value targets, officers, radio operators, machine gun crews, medics. Kill them one at a time. A single sniper could paralyze an entire battalion. Officers who raised their heads were shot. Radio operators who tried to transmit were shot. Anyone who appeared to be giving orders was shot. Standard infantry doctrine had no effective counter to skilled snipers. You could not suppress them with machine gun fire if you could not see them. You could not call in artillery if the radio operator was dead. You could not organize a response if every leader who tried to lead was killed. By May 21st, German snipers had become the single greatest threat to New Zealand command and control around Maleme. Lieutenant Colonel John Leckie commanded the 23rd Battalion, positioned south of Maleme, covering the approaches from Platanias. He was 45 years old, a veteran of Gallipoli and the Western Front, a professional soldier who understood exactly what the German snipers were doing to his men. "We're losing officers faster than we can replace them," Leckie told his adjutant on the morning of May 21st. "The juries have snipers everywhere. We can't move during daylight without losing someone." His adjutant suggested pulling back to more defensible positions. Leckie shook his head. "If we pull back, they'll take the airfield. If they take the airfield, they'll fly in reinforcements. If they fly in reinforcements, we lose Crete." He paused, staring at the map. "We need to kill the snipers. Find someone who can do it." His adjutant knew exactly who to ask. Sergeant Clive Hume had spent the first day of the battle leading his improvised unit of former prisoners against German positions near the airfield. The 23 men he had armed that morning fought with a fury that surprised everyone, including Hume. These were soldiers who had been written off as troublemakers, men who had been locked up for fighting their own comrades. Now they had an enemy to fight, and they proved that their aggressive instincts could be channeled into something useful. By noon on May 20th, Hume's group had participated in 3 separate engagements against German paratroopers. They had cleared pockets of resistance in front of the New Zealand defensive line, killing or capturing dozens of Fallschirmjäger who had established themselves in farmhouses and stone walls. 130 German bodies were counted in their sector by the end of the first day. But the snipers were a different problem. On May 21st, Hume was moving between forward positions when he heard the crack of a rifle shot. A corporal walking 10 feet to his left dropped without a sound. Another shot. A private went down clutching his chest. Hume dove behind an olive tree and scanned the ridgeline. Nothing. The shooter was invisible. He waited. Minutes passed. A New Zealand stretcher-bearer emerged from cover to retrieve the wounded private. A shot rang out. The stretcher-bearer fell. 3 men dead or wounded in less than 2 minutes. The sniper had killed or wounded 3 soldiers, and Hume had not even glimpsed him. That afternoon, Hume volunteered for counter-sniper duty. Lieutenant Colonel Leckie approved immediately. "Kill them and kill them, whatever it takes." Over the next 2 days, Hume stalked and eliminated several German snipers using conventional tactics: patience, observation, careful movement, standard counter-sniper work that required hours of motionless waiting for each target. It was effective, but slow. For every sniper Hume killed, 2 more seemed to appear.
The Germans were reinforcing their sniper teams as quickly as Hume could eliminate them. He needed a new approach. On May 22nd, while moving through the Field Punishment Center compound, Hume encountered a lone German paratrooper who had become separated from his unit. The German was young, perhaps 19. He looked lost, confused, exhausted. When he saw Hume, he raised his rifle with trembling hands. Hume was faster. Single shot, center mass. The German dropped. Hume approached the body and examined the equipment. The dead German paratrooper wore a distinctive splinter-pattern camouflage smock, standard issue for Fallschirmjäger snipers. Next to him lay a Carabiner 98K with a Zeiss scope mounted on the receiver. Hume stared at the equipment for a long moment. He thought about the New Zealand soldiers dying to invisible shooters. He thought about the German snipers who walked freely through contested areas because no one could distinguish them from regular infantry at a distance. He thought about how many New Zealanders he could save if he could get close to the enemy snipers before they knew what was happening. He stripped the camouflage smock off the dead German. It was still warm, blood on the left side, but the rest intact. He took the rifle, checked the action, counted the remaining rounds. 7 in the magazine. He found 2 spare magazines on the body, 47 rounds total. Hume pulled the German smock over his New Zealand uniform and slung the Carabiner 98K across his shoulder. He did not ask permission, he did not file paperwork, he did not consider the legal implications under the Geneva Convention. He simply walked toward the German lines, wearing enemy camouflage and carrying enemy weapons. The next German sniper he encountered would have no idea what was about to happen. At 0700 hours on May 23rd, Clive Hume moved through the olive groves west of Maleme, wearing the German camouflage smock. The splinter pattern worked exactly as designed. Against the Mediterranean vegetation, the angular shapes broke up his silhouette perfectly. From 200 yards, he looked like any other Fallschirmjäger moving between positions. He spotted his first target at 7:45 hours. A German sniper had established a hide in the ruins of a stone farmhouse overlooking the coastal road. The position gave him clear sight lines to any New Zealand movement between Platanias and the airfield. From that single location, the sniper could kill a dozen men before anyone located him. Hume watched the German through field glasses. The man was scanning methodically, professionally, patiently, dangerous. Standard counter-sniper doctrine called for careful approach under cover, finding a position with a clear shot and engaging from maximum effective range. The process took hours and risked alerting the target. Hume tried something different. He stood up and walked openly across the field toward the farmhouse. No concealment, no tactical movement, just a German soldier returning to his position. The sniper glanced up as Hume approached. He registered the camouflage smock, the Carabiner 98, the easy stride of a fellow paratrooper. He returned to scanning the road. Hume closed to 50 yards, 40, 30. At 25 yards, Hume raised the German rifle and fired. The sniper dropped without making a sound. Hume searched the body. The dead German carried 120 rounds of ammunition, 3 stick grenades, and a detailed map of Maleme Airfield with New Zealand positions marked in pencil. Intelligence officers would want that map. Hume took the ammunition, the grenades, and the map. Then he moved on to find the next target. By noon on May 23rd, he had eliminated 3 more German snipers using identical tactics. Walk openly, get close, fire once. Each time, the camouflage smock provided the critical advantage. The Germans saw one of their own until the moment they died. No challenge, no warning, no chance to respond. On May 24th, Hume expanded his operations. He began moving behind German lines, targeting snipers who were positioned too deep for conventional counter-sniper work to reach. The missions required him to walk through concentrations of German infantry, sometimes passing within 10 feet of enemy soldiers who had no idea they were looking at a New Zealand sergeant. The deception held every time. German Fallschirmjäger operated in dispersed formations after the initial drop. The chaos of the landing had scattered units across miles of Cretan countryside. Individual paratroopers and small groups constantly moved between positions, regrouped with survivors from other sticks, and established new fighting positions wherever they found cover. Communications were chaotic. Unit cohesion was loose. Nobody knew exactly who was supposed to be where. One more soldier in splinter camouflage attracted no attention whatsoever. Hume exploited this confusion repeatedly. At 14:30 hours on May 24th, he was moving through a German assembly area near Galatas when a German Fallschirmjäger Oberleutnant approached him. The officer said something in German that Hume could not understand and gestured sharply toward the ridge to the east. An order, go that way. Hume nodded, said nothing, and walked in the indicated direction. The officer watched him go for a moment, then turned to deal with other matters. He never realized he had just given tactical instructions to an enemy sergeant who now knew exactly where the next German attack would focus.
Private William Brennan of the 23rd Battalion was manning a forward observation post that evening when he saw something that made no sense. A German soldier in full camouflage walking calmly toward the New Zealand lines, carrying a German rifle, moving with none of the caution that combat usually demanded. Brennan raised his rifle. His finger found the trigger. Then the German soldier spoke in a broad New Zealand accent. "Don't shoot, mate. It's Hume, Provost Sergeant." Brennan lowered his rifle. "Jesus Christ, Sarge, I nearly put a round through your head." Hume shrugged. "That's the risk. Tell Lecky he'll be back by morning. There's a sniper nest on the ridge I need to deal with." He turned and walked back into the German-held territory, disappearing into the olive groves. By the evening of May 24th, Hume had killed 11 German snipers in 3 days of independent operations. His battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Lecky, tried to order him to stand down and rest. Hume refused. The German snipers were still killing New Zealanders. He went back out before dawn on May 25th. On May 25th, the New Zealand Division launched a desperate counterattack to recapture the village of Galatas. The Germans had taken the village the previous day, pushing the Allied perimeter dangerously close to Hanya. If Galatas remained in German hands, the entire defensive position around Suda Bay would become untenable. The counterattack was improvised, desperate, and ultimately doomed to fail. But it had to be attempted. Hume joined the assault. The 23rd Battalion attacked from the east, supported by 2 light tanks that represented the entire Allied armored force on the island. The Germans had fortified a school building at the western edge of the village, converting it into a strongpoint with machine gun positions covering every approach. The initial New Zealand advance was stopped cold. Men were pinned down in the streets, unable to advance or retreat, taking casualties from German fire that swept every exposed position. Sergeant Arthur Stanley was crouched behind a stone wall when Hume appeared beside him. Stanley later described the encounter in a letter to his family. Hume was wearing a jerry smock covered in blood, not his blood. He had a German rifle and a bandolier of German ammunition. He looked like a madman, but his eyes were absolutely calm. He asked me where the machine gun was. I pointed to the school. He nodded and started moving forward through the rubble. Hume worked his way toward the school building using the same deception that had served him in the sniper hunts. The Germans in the school saw a Fallschirmjäger approaching their position, just another paratrooper moving between fighting positions. He reached the school building, pulled 3 stick grenades from his belt, and threw them through the ground floor windows in quick succession. 3 explosions. The machine gun fell silent. The New Zealand counterattack surged forward. The 23rd Battalion retook Galatas that afternoon in brutal house-to-house fighting. Every building had to be cleared. Every room had to be checked. German soldiers fought with the desperation of men who knew they were cut off from reinforcement. But the victory lasted less than 24 hours. German reinforcements arrived during the night of May 25th to May 26th. By morning, the counterattack had been reversed. Galatas was back in German hands, and the New Zealand Division was withdrawing toward Suda Bay. The evacuation from Crete had begun. The island was lost. On the night of May 26th, a runner found Hume at the battalion assembly area. The runner carried a message from headquarters, written on a scrap of paper torn from a signals log. Hume took the paper and read it by the light of a burning building 300 yards away. The message was brief. Corporal Harold Charles Hume, 19th Battalion, killed in action, May 26, 1941, northeast of Galatas. Hume read the message twice. Then he folded the paper, put it in his pocket, and picked up the German rifle. His younger brother, dead. Somewhere on this same island, probably less than 5 miles from where Hume was standing. Harold had joined the army 3 months after Clive. They had shipped out to Egypt together. They had written letters to their mother together, carefully coordinating what they said so she would not worry too much. They had planned to go fishing together when the war was over, back at the rivers near Dunedin where they had grown up. Now Harold was lying in a field somewhere, probably not even buried, left behind in the chaos of the retreat. Private Thomas Henley was standing near Hume when the message arrived. He described what happened next. Hume's face didn't change. He read the paper, put it away, and checked his rifle. His hands were completely steady, but something was different about him after that. Something cold. He looked at the German lines like he was measuring them for a coffin. Hume said nothing to anyone. He simply walked toward the darkness, toward the German positions, wearing the stolen camouflage smock and carrying the dead man's rifle. The retreat could wait. The German snipers advancing behind the retreating New Zealanders were about to discover what happened when you made this war personal. At 0500 hours on May 27th, Hume positioned himself on a hillside overlooking the road to Suda Bay. Below him, the 23rd Battalion moved west in a fighting withdrawal.
Behind them, German advance units pushed forward aggressively, trying to cut off the retreat before the Allies could reach the evacuation beaches. German snipers moved with the advance. Hume counted at least 8 enemy shooters working the ridge lines around the withdrawal route. They were targeting New Zealand officers and NCOs specifically, trying to break the command structure and cohesion of the retreating units. Hume had not slept since receiving the news about his brother 18 hours earlier. He had spent the night moving through the German positions, learning their patterns, identifying their most skilled snipers, memorizing terrain. Now he was going to kill them systematically. The first target appeared at 0520 hours. A German sniper working his way up a rocky outcrop 300 yards south of the road. The man moved with confidence, clearly experienced. Hume tracked him through the Zeiss scope, waited for him to settle into his firing position, and shot him through the upper chest. The German pitched backward and tumbled down the rocks. Hume moved immediately. Standard counter-sniper doctrine. Never fire twice from the same position. The enemy would triangulate your location and respond. At 0615 hours, he killed the second sniper from a completely different angle, 400 yards east of the first position. At 0730, the third from 800 yards west. By 9 a.m., he had eliminated 5 German snipers along a 2-mile stretch of the withdrawal route. The New Zealand rearguard suddenly moved faster, took fewer casualties, maintained better unit formation. Nobody in the 23rd Battalion knew Hume was out there. They simply noticed that the devastating sniper fire had mysteriously stopped. At 1040 hours, Hume spotted a group of 5 German snipers establishing positions on a hillside overlooking the battalion's exposed left flank. The location was tactically perfect for an ambush. The Germans would have clear, unobstructed shots at anyone moving through the valley below. If those snipers remained in position, the retreat would turn into a slaughter. Hume approached from the north, moving openly down the hillside, wearing the camouflage smock and carrying the Carabiner 98. The Germans saw him coming from 400 yards away. One of them waved. Another shouted something in German that Hume could not understand. Hume waved back and kept walking. The approach took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of walking calmly toward men who would kill him instantly if they realized what he was. He closed to 70 yards. 60. 50. At 40 yards, one of the Germans stood up and started walking casually toward him. The man was smiling, saying something conversational, probably asking where Hume's unit was positioned, probably wondering if Hume had seen enemy movement. Hume raised the Carabiner 98 and shot him in the chest. The other 4 Germans froze for a critical half-second, trying to process what their eyes were showing them. One of their own had just shot one of their own. It violated every assumption they had about the situation. Hume worked the bolt smoothly and fired again. Second German down. The remaining 3 scrambled desperately for their rifles. Hume fired twice more in rapid succession. 2 more Germans fell. The 5th man got his rifle up and managed to fire 1 shot. The round passed 6 inches over Hume's head and cracked into the rocks behind him. Hume's next shot did not miss. He searched the bodies methodically. Between them, they carried 400 rounds of rifle ammunition, 2 signal flares, field glasses, and written orders showing they had been specifically tasked with targeting the New Zealand withdrawal. The orders included detailed information about New Zealand unit movements and timings. Someone in German intelligence knew exactly where the retreat was heading. Hume took the ammunition and the orders and continued hunting. By 1400 hours on May 27th, Hume's confirmed kill count stood at 16 snipers in 2.5 days. Lieutenant Colonel Leckie tracked him down during a brief halt and asked directly if he could continue operating independently. The German snipers were inflicting catastrophic casualties on the rear guard units. Every sniper Hume eliminated meant New Zealand soldiers made it to the evacuation beaches alive. Hume said he could continue. He did not mention his brother. He did not explain his motivation. He did not describe the cold rage that was driving him forward through exhaustion and dehydration and the constant threat of discovery. Leckie gave him written authorization to operate independently for as long as necessary, and to requisition any equipment or support he required. At 16:30 hours, Hume was back in the field, ahead of the battalion, scouting the next phase line of the withdrawal route. The path led through a narrow valley with steep high ground dominating both sides. Textbook sniper terrain, the perfect killing ground. He found 3 German snipers already in position among the rocks, waiting patiently for the New Zealanders to enter the valley. They were well concealed, disciplined. They would have devastated the battalion. Hume eliminated all 3 before the lead elements arrived. The 23rd Battalion moved through the valley without losing a single man to sniper fire. By nightfall on May 27th, Hume's confirmed kill count stood at 19 German snipers in a single day. 19 men, each one a trained specialist, each one capable of killing dozens of Allied soldiers, each one dead because a New Zealand sergeant in a stolen uniform had walked up to them and shot them before they understood what was happening.
Behind them, German advance units pushed forward aggressively, trying to cut off the retreat before the Allies could reach the evacuation beaches. German snipers moved with the advance. Hume counted at least 8 enemy shooters working the ridge lines around the withdrawal route. They were targeting New Zealand officers and NCOs specifically, trying to break the command structure and cohesion of the retreating units. Hume had not slept since receiving the news about his brother 18 hours earlier. He had spent the night moving through the German positions, learning their patterns, identifying their most skilled snipers, memorizing terrain. Now he was going to kill them systematically. The first target appeared at 0520 hours. A German sniper working his way up a rocky outcrop 300 yards south of the road. The man moved with confidence, clearly experienced.
Hume tracked him through the Zeiss scope, waited for him to settle into his firing position, and shot him through the upper chest. The German pitched backward and tumbled down the rocks. Hume moved immediately. Standard counter-sniper doctrine. Never fire twice from the same position. The enemy would triangulate your location and respond. At 06:15 hours, he killed the second sniper from a completely different angle, 400 yards east of the first position. At 07:30, the third from 800 yards west. By 9 a.m., he had eliminated 5 German snipers along a 2-mile stretch of the withdrawal route. The New Zealand rearguard suddenly moved faster, took fewer casualties, maintained better unit formation. Nobody in the 23rd Battalion knew Hume was out there. They simply noticed that the devastating sniper fire had mysteriously stopped. At 10:40 hours, Hume spotted a group of 5 German snipers establishing positions on a hillside overlooking the battalion's exposed left flank. The location was tactically perfect for an ambush. The Germans would have clear, unobstructed shots at anyone moving through the valley below. If those snipers remained in position, the retreat would turn into a slaughter. Hume approached from the north, moving openly down the hillside, wearing the camouflage smock and carrying the Karabiner 98. The Germans saw him coming from 400 yards away. One of them waved. Another shouted something in German that Hume could not understand. Hume waved back and kept walking. The approach took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of walking calmly toward men who would kill him instantly if they realized what he was. He closed to 70 yards, 60, 50. At 40 yards, one of the Germans stood up and started walking casually toward him. The man was smiling, saying something conversational, probably asking where Hume's unit was positioned, probably wondering if Hume had seen enemy movement. Hume raised the Karabiner 98 and shot him in the chest. The other 4 Germans froze for a critical half-second, trying to process what their eyes were showing them. One of their own had just shot one of their own. It violated every assumption they had about the situation. Hume worked the bolt smoothly and fired again. Second German down. The remaining 3 scrambled desperately for their rifles. Hume fired twice more in rapid succession. 2 more Germans fell. The 5th man got his rifle up and managed to fire 1 shot. The round passed 6 inches over Hume's head and cracked into the rocks behind him. Hume's next shot did not miss. He searched the bodies methodically. Between them, they carried 400 rounds of rifle ammunition, 2 signal flares, field glasses, and written orders showing they had been specifically tasked with targeting the New Zealand withdrawal. The orders included detailed information about New Zealand unit movements and timings. Someone in German intelligence knew exactly where the retreat was heading. Hume took the ammunition and the orders and continued hunting. By 1400 hours on May 27th, Hume's confirmed kill count stood at 16 snipers in 2.5 days. Lieutenant Colonel Leckie tracked him down during a brief halt and asked directly if he could continue operating independently. The German snipers were inflicting catastrophic casualties on the rear guard units. Every sniper Hume eliminated meant New Zealand soldiers made it to the evacuation beaches alive. Hume said he could continue. He did not mention his brother. He did not explain his motivation. He did not describe the cold rage that was driving him forward through exhaustion and dehydration and the constant threat of discovery. Leckie gave him written authorization to operate independently for as long as necessary, and to requisition any equipment or support he required. At 16:30 hours, Hume was back in the field, ahead of the battalion, scouting the next phase line of the withdrawal route. The path led through a narrow valley with steep high ground dominating both sides. Textbook sniper terrain, the perfect killing ground. He found 3 German snipers already in position among the rocks, waiting patiently for the New Zealanders to enter the valley. They were well concealed, disciplined. They would have devastated the battalion. Hume eliminated all 3 before the lead elements arrived. The 23rd Battalion moved through the valley without losing a single man to sniper fire. By nightfall on May 27th, Hume's confirmed kill count stood at 19 German snipers in a single day. 19 men, each one a trained specialist, each one capable of killing dozens of Allied soldiers, each one dead because a New Zealand sergeant in a stolen uniform had walked up to them and shot them before they understood what was happening.
But the withdrawal was not finished. Tomorrow, the battalion would have to cross even more dangerous terrain to reach Stylos, and the Germans would be waiting with everything they had. At 0430 hours on May 28th, the 23rd Battalion began its withdrawal from the defensive line west of Galatas towards Stylos. The route crossed exposed terrain with limited cover. German forces were pressing hard from multiple directions. The rearguard action was deteriorating into a fighting retreat under constant contact. Hume moved ahead of the main body before dawn, scouting the high ground that overlooked the withdrawal route. The ridge at Stylos dominated the entire approach. Whoever controlled that ridge controlled the road. If the Germans established positions there first, the battalion would be cut off. At 0415 hours, May 28th, Hume reached the ridge and immediately spotted the problem. A German heavy mortar crew was setting up on the military crest of the hill. 4 men, 1 Granatwerfer 34 mortar. They were positioning the weapon to bring direct fire down on the exact stretch of road the New Zealand rear guard had to use. The timing was perfect. The Germans would hit the battalion at its most vulnerable moment. Hume was 800 yards away, too far for an accurate rifle shot. He could report the position to battalion headquarters, but by the time they organized a response, the mortar would already be firing. He moved closer, using dead ground and rock formations. The final 300 yards required him to cross open ground in full view of the mortar position. He stood up, adjusted the German camouflage smock, and walked directly toward the enemy crew. The Germans saw him immediately. One of them waved, another shouted a question. Hume waved back and kept walking. At 50 yards, he could hear them talking. At 30 yards, one of them laughed at something. At 15 yards, Hume raised the Carabiner 98 and shot the nearest German. He worked the bolt, fired again. Second German down. The remaining 2 scrambled for their weapons. Hume shot them both before either could return fire. He approached the mortar position and examined the weapon. The Granatwerfer 34 was already assembled and aimed. Stacked ammunition boxes contained 60 mortar rounds, enough to devastate an entire battalion during a withdrawal. Hume pulled the firing pin assembly from the mortar, threw it down the hillside, and kicked the ammunition boxes after it. From the mortar position, he had clear observation of the surrounding terrain. He scanned the ridgeline with field glasses and identified 3 more German snipers moving into position along the western approach. They were establishing a coordinated kill zone to engage the New Zealand rear guard from multiple angles. He went after them. The first sniper never saw him coming. Hume approached from behind, walking openly across the ridge. The German was focused downrange, watching the road for targets. Single shot. The sniper pitched forward. The second German sniper was 200 yards further west. Same approach. Walk openly. Close the distance. Fire once. The sniper dropped. The third German sniper was more alert. When Hume was still 80 yards away, the German turned and looked directly at him. For a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other across the distance.
The German's eyes moved from the camouflage smock to Hume's face to the rifle in his hands. Something registered. Wrong face, wrong expression, wrong stance. The German swung his rifle around. Hume fired first. The German went down, but managed to get off one shot as he fell. The round hit Hume high in the left shoulder and spun him sideways. He dropped to one knee, worked the bolt, and fired again to make sure the German stayed down. Blood soaked through the camouflage smock. The wound was bad. He could feel it. Bone damage, heavy bleeding. He needed medical attention immediately. But the 23rd Battalion was still moving through the withdrawal route below him, and there were more German snipers in the area. He tore a strip from the dead German uniform and wrapped it around his shoulder as a field dressing. The bleeding slowed, but did not stop. He picked up the Carabiner 98 with his right hand. His left arm was not responding properly. At 0:30, Hume was on the ridge when he spotted another German sniper working toward the road. Target number 34. Hume raised the rifle one-handed, braced it against a rock, and tried to aim. The scope wavered. His vision was blurring from blood loss. He squeezed the trigger. The shot went wide. The German sniper spun around, saw Hume, and returned fire. The second bullet hit Hume in the same shoulder, tearing through muscle and shattering bone. He fell backward behind the rocks. The German rifle clattered away down the hillside. His left arm was completely useless now. Blood was pooling under him. He could hear the German sniper moving closer, coming to finish him. This was how it ended, alone on a ridge on Crete. 33 German snipers dead, but not 34. Hume heard the German's boots crunching on gravel. The footsteps came closer. 30 feet. 20. The German was moving cautiously, rifle up, checking angles. Professional. Careful. He knew Hume was wounded but not dead, and wounded men could still fight. Hume found a rock the size of a grenade. His vision swam. Blood loss was shutting down his body. The footsteps stopped 10 feet away. The German was circling around the rocks, trying to get a clear shot without exposing himself. Hume threw the rock hard to his left. It clattered against stone 30 feet away. The German spun toward the sound and fired twice. In that moment, Hume rolled right, grabbed a loose stone with his functioning hand, and hurled it directly at the German's head. The impact staggered him backward. His rifle dipped. Hume lunged forward, driving his weight into the German's legs. Both men went down.
The sniper tried to bring his rifle around. Hume grabbed the barrel with his right hand and wrenched it sideways. The German pulled a knife from his belt. Hume headbutted him twice, felt the man's nose break, and kept driving forward until the German stopped moving. He lay on top of the unconscious German for a long moment, breathing hard, trying to stay conscious. His left shoulder was destroyed, blood everywhere. He needed to get off this ridge before he bled out or more Germans arrived. The withdrawal route below was empty now. The 23rd Battalion had already passed through. Hume was alone on the ridge with dead Germans and no way to contact friendly forces. He started crawling downhill, dragging his useless left arm, following the path the battalion had taken. At 0940 hours, a New Zealand patrol found him collapsed on the road 2 miles from Stylos. The patrol commander took one look at Hume's wounds and called for stretcher bearers. Hume tried to protest, tried to tell them about the German positions, but the words would not come out properly. They carried him to the medical aid station at Stylos. The medical officer examined the shoulder wounds and immediately tagged him for evacuation. Both bullets had shattered the scapula. Bone fragments were embedded in muscle tissue.
Without proper surgical intervention, Hume would lose the arm or die from infection. Lieutenant Colonel Lecky visited him at the aid station that afternoon. The colonel brought field reports showing that German sniper activity along the withdrawal route had effectively ceased. The rear guard had suffered minimal casualties during the retreat to Stylos. The mortar position Hume had destroyed would have killed dozens of men. Lecky told him he was being recommended for the Victoria Cross. Hume asked about his brother's body, whether anyone had recovered it, whether there would be a grave. Lecky had no information. The 19th Battalion had withdrawn under heavy contact. Many dead had been left behind. On May 29th, the 23rd Battalion completed its withdrawal to Sfakia, on the southern coast of Crete. The Royal Navy was evacuating Allied forces from the beaches under constant German air attack. Destroyers and cruisers approached the shore after dark, loaded as many men as they could carry, and departed before dawn brought the Luftwaffe. Hume was loaded onto a destroyer, along with hundreds of other wounded. The ship departed Crete at 2300 hours on May 30th. The voyage to Egypt took 18 hours. German aircraft attacked the convoy twice. The destroyer's anti-aircraft guns shot down 3 Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers. Hume watched the engagement from the medical bay, unable to do anything except lie still and try not to reopen his wounds. The ship reached Alexandria on June 1st. Hume was transferred to a military hospital where surgeons spent 4 hours removing bullet fragments and repairing tissue damage. The doctors told him he would never regain full use of his left arm. He would be medically discharged. His war was over. On June 15th, Hume was placed on a hospital ship bound for New Zealand. The voyage took 3 weeks. He spent most of it staring at the ceiling of the medical ward, thinking about his brother, thinking about the snipers he had killed, thinking about the men from the 23rd Battalion who had made it off Crete because German snipers had not been there to shoot them. He arrived in Auckland on July 10th, 1941. The ship docked at 0700 hours. His wife, Rona, was waiting on the pier. She had not been told he was wounded. When she saw him come down the gangway with his left arm in a sling and 40 pounds lighter than when he had left, she started crying. Hume held her with his one good arm and said nothing. There was nothing to say. On October 10th, 1941, the London Gazette published Hume's Victoria Cross citation. The official text documented his actions between May 20th and May 28th, leading counterattacks at Maleme, destroying the machine gun position at Galatas, eliminating the mortar crew at Stylos, stalking and shooting 33 enemy snipers. The citation made no mention of the German camouflage smock, no mention of the deception tactics that had allowed Hume to walk among the enemy, no mention of the legal ambiguity under the Geneva Convention. The New Zealand press ran the story on page 1. National hero, Victoria Cross recipient, farm laborer from Dunedin who had single-handedly hunted down German snipers behind enemy lines. The newspapers loved it. The public loved it. Hume hated every minute of the attention. On November 7th, he traveled to Wellington for the formal presentation ceremony at Government House. The Governor-General, Sir Cyril Newell, pinned the Victoria Cross to his uniform in front of assembled military officials, politicians, and journalists. Photographers took pictures. Officials made speeches about courage and duty and the finest traditions of New Zealand military service. Hume stood at attention, said nothing,
and thought about his brother lying in an unmarked grave somewhere on Crete. After the ceremony, a reporter asked him how it felt to be a hero. Hume said it did not feel like anything. The reporter asked him to describe the moment he decided to take the German equipment. Hume said there was no moment. He saw an opportunity and took it. The reporter asked if he had been afraid. Hume said everyone was afraid. The reporter kept asking questions until Hume walked away. On February 17, 1942, the Army officially discharged him as temporarily medically unfit for service. His left shoulder had not healed properly. Range of motion was severely limited. He could not carry a rifle effectively. The medical board concluded he would never be fit for combat duty again. Hume returned to civilian life at 31 years old, with the Victoria Cross, a useless left arm, and no clear idea what to do next. The war was still happening.
The 23rd Battalion was still fighting in North Africa. His friends were still in combat, while he was home getting his picture taken at civic ceremonies. In May 1942, the government recalled him for home defense service, non-combat duty, training recruits, administrative work. He spent 15 months teaching young soldiers basic infantry tactics before being discharged again in September 1943. He reached the rank of Warrant Officer, Class 2. After the war, Hume moved to Pongakawa, near Tepuke in the Bay of Plenty. He purchased a small trucking company and worked as a general carrier, hauling freight, moving equipment, nothing that required two functional shoulders. The work was steady, the money was adequate. Nobody asked him about Crete. He married Rona Marjorie Murcott. They had 2 sons. Hume never talked to them about the war, never mentioned the snipers, never explained how he won the Victoria Cross. When people asked, he changed the subject. When veterans' organizations invited him to speak, he declined. In 1946, the British government invited all Commonwealth Victoria Cross recipients to London for the victory celebrations. Hume attended. He met other VC winners, sat through formal dinners, participated in parades. The King shook his hand. Churchill gave a speech. Hume smiled for photographs and wished he was back in New Zealand hauling freight. Over the years, military historians tracked down veterans from the 23rd Battalion and interviewed them about Crete. Several men confirmed seeing Hume wearing the German camouflage smock. Others described finding dead German snipers with no explanation for who had killed them. One sergeant remembered Hume disappearing for days at a time during the withdrawal and returning with ammunition he had not been issued. The story spread. The legend grew. Hume never corrected the exaggerations, never disputed the inaccuracies. He simply refused to discuss it at all. In 1953, a military researcher asked him directly how he felt about killing 33 men. Hume said he did not feel anything about it. The researcher asked if he ever thought about the Germans he had killed. Hume said he thought about his brother. The researcher asked if he had any regrets. Hume said his only regret was that the 34th sniper got away. In 1967, his son Denny Hume won the Formula One World Drivers' Championship, the only New Zealander ever to achieve that distinction. The press descended on Pongakawa, looking for the father of New Zealand's racing hero. They found a 60-year-old trucking company manager with a Victoria Cross in a drawer, and no interest in talking about either racing or war. Hume ran his trucking business until retirement. He maintained minimal contact with military organizations. He attended Anzac Day ceremonies, but did not give speeches. When the Queen Elizabeth II Army Memorial Museum at Wairau requested his Victoria Cross for display, he loaned it to them on the condition they not make a fuss about it. On September 2, 1982, Alfred Clive Hume died in Te Puke at age 71. Natural causes. No warning. He was buried at Dudley Cemetery with full military honors. Veterans from the 2nd New Zealand Expeditionary Force served as pallbearers. The funeral service was brief. No eulogies, no speeches about heroism. Exactly as he would have wanted it. His Victoria Cross remained on display at Wairau until December 2, 2007, when thieves broke into the museum and stole it, along with 8 other Victoria Crosses. The theft generated international outrage. British Lord Michael Ashcroft and New Zealand businessman Tom Sturgis offered a $300,000 reward for information leading to the medal's recovery. On February 16, 2008, police recovered all 9 medals undamaged. The thieves were eventually convicted and sentenced to prison. The Victoria Cross returned to the museum, where it remains today, a small bronze cross that represents 8 days of killing on a Greek island that the Allies lost anyway. The question that nobody asked Clive Hume, because he would have never answered it, was whether it had mattered. 33 dead snipers, dozens of New Zealand lives saved, a Victoria Cross, but the Allies had still lost the battle. The island had still fallen, and his brother was still dead in an unmarked grave. The Battle of Crete lasted 11 days. From May 20th to May 31st, 1941, Allied forces fought a losing defensive action against the largest airborne invasion in military history. When it ended, 3,500 Allied soldiers were dead. 12,000 were captured. The survivors evacuated to Egypt. German casualties were severe. 4,000 dead, 2,500 wounded. The Fallschirmjäger divisions never fully recovered from the losses. Hitler banned large-scale airborne operations for the rest of the war. But Germany held Crete. The Allies did not. In that context, what Hume accomplished seemed insignificant. 33 dead snipers against thousands of casualties on both sides. A local tactical success in a strategic defeat. One sergeant with a stolen rifle who slowed down the German advance by perhaps a few hours. But the numbers told a different story. During the 8-day period from May 20th to May 28, 1941, German sniper teams operating around Maleme and the withdrawal routes to Suda Bay killed an estimated 200 Allied soldiers. The actual number was probably higher. In the sector where Hume operated, German sniper effectiveness dropped 90% after May 23rd. The 23rd Battalion's casualty reports documented the change. Between May 20th and May 22nd, the battalion lost 47 men to sniper fire. Between May 23rd and May 30th, they lost 6. The difference was Hume. 33 confirmed kills in 8 days, slightly more than 4 per day. That rate placed Hume among the most effective counter-snipers of the entire Second World War. No other documented case matched that combination of speed, effectiveness, and operational audacity. The German camouflage smock was the key innovation. Standard counter-sniper doctrine in 1941 involved observation, triangulation, and suppressive fire. Time-consuming, resource-intensive, often ineffective against skilled snipers who changed positions frequently. Hume bypassed all of that by simply walking up to enemy snipers while appearing to be one of them. The approach carried enormous risk. If discovered, Hume would have been executed immediately as a spy. Combatants wearing enemy uniforms forfeited protection as prisoners of war. the Germans would have been legally justified in shooting him on sight. Hume understood the risk. He did it anyway. Every single time he put on that German smock, he was betting his life that the deception would hold long enough to get within killing range. It held 33 times. The men of the 23rd Battalion who survived the withdrawal from Crete knew exactly how many of them would have died if Hume had not been on those ridge lines, wearing a German camouflage smock and carrying a dead man's rifle. They were the only audience that mattered to Clive Hume, and they were the only people whose opinion he never had to ask. He already knew the answer.